Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central Television. I am Judith at TV. Here are the stories making headlines beyond the continent. And we begin the news in North America, where President Luis Abinader has announced plans to extend the border wall with Haiti by an additional 10 to 12 kilometers, increasing the total length to 176 kilometers. This move aims to curb irregular migration and smuggling between two nations. The border wall project, which began in February 2023, includes a 3.9-meter high concrete wall topped with metal mesh, fiber optics, movement sensors, cameras, radar, and drones. The wall is being built in Dominican Republic territory, allowing soldiers to patrol on both sides. The extension is part of the government's efforts to secure the border and reduce illegal activities. However, the project has been met with controversy, with some arguing it will do little to reduce illegal migration and may lead to increased tensions between the two nations.
Lo primero es que debido al éxito de los primeros 34 kilómetros, me parece, de Dajabón, al éxito de cómo se ha comportado ese muro, que ha disminuido en un 80% en esa área los robos tanto de ganado como de motores, de vehículos, pues nos están pidiendo que extiendan el muro. Eso va a un proceso de licitación. Y lo que hemos hablado es que pueden ser una extensión de 10 a 12 kilómetros, que es lo que nos permite el presupuesto plurianual, tanto de una parte en este año y la próxima parte para el año 2026.
Still in North America, demonstrators took to the streets in Miami, Florida on President's Day to express their opposition to U.S. President Donald Trump's administration. The protesters voiced their concerns about the direction the country is heading, particularly fearing the erosion of civil rights. The number of individuals in the crowd expressed deep apprehension, with some even warning that the country might be slipping toward a fascist dictatorship. The protest was one of many organized across the United States to mark President's Day, a day typically associated with honoring U.S. presidents. Protesters carried placards and signs comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, the American flag, and anti-fascism signs.
Hitler did the same thing in Germany, where he blamed the Jews at first, and little by little he started taking away their rights, like Donald Trump is doing now to our immigrants. And I feel like we're headed down the same path. The way that
going in with a bazooka and breaking all of our agencies to make them fail and to privatize for them for profit. And it's disconcerting at least, terrifying at most.
Country. I'm a veteran, and it disgusts me that this person is even in charge of the military. He has no business. He's a draft dodger. I'm worried. I'm worried that we're going to lose all of our rights. We're going to become a fascist dictatorship, and it's not going to happen under my watch. I'm going to do everything I can to stop it.
It's going to be terrible. We have to stop him. We cannot let him be president. He's not a gentleman. He's not a good man. He hates women and he hates immigrants.
In Europe, a high-stakes gamble is unfolding as President Donald Trump races to broker a peace deal in Ukraine. With his eyes on a swift political victory and possibly a Nobel Peace Prize, Trump is pushing for an agreement that could reshape global security. But critics warn his rapid-fire diplomacy risks strengthening Russia while undermining Ukraine and Europe's stability. For News Central, international correspondent Afia Hagen has the latest.
I want to get the war ended.
A dangerous fault line is opening in the push to end the war in Ukraine. President Trump is pushing for a deal, and fast, but the question remains, at what cost? His decision to hold US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia without Ukrainian or European officials has raised alarms. Critics say he's sidelining key allies while making risky concessions to Vladimir Putin. Trump has long promised to end the war within 24 hours, but experts say his approach ignores critical security concerns. His willingness to let Russia keep occupied territory and even stake a claim to Ukraine's rare earth metals has drawn fierce backlash. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected that proposal outright. Meanwhile, the Kremlin appears to be playing its own game. Ahead of the Saudi talks, Putin handed Trump a symbolic win, releasing several American prisoners, including one just days ago. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are now in Saudi Arabia to assess Russia's true intentions. But the risks are clear. A rushed deal could embolden Putin, weaken European security, and lay the groundwork for future conflict. At the end of the Cold War, President George H.W. Bush carefully managed the Soviet Union's collapse, prioritizing long-term stability. In contrast, Trump's critics argue his view of diplomacy, more like a real estate deal, could lead to dangerous miscalculations. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
The U.S. and Russia have held high-level talks in Saudi Arabia, marking the first step in a long and difficult journey toward ending the Ukraine war, according to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The 4-hour meeting has been described as positive and constructive by a Russian representative. Meanwhile, both nations have agreed to appoint teams for further negotiations. Rubio met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, but neither Ukraine nor European representatives were invited. The Kremlin stated that President Vladimir Putin is willing to speak with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky if necessary. However, Zelensky has repeatedly insisted that Ukraine will not recognize any peace deal negotiated without its involvement. The U.S. has not responded to concerns that Ukraine has been sidelined in the discussions. And now joining us to discuss this is World Affairs analyst Bolu Michael B. And he joins us live from Kigali, Rwanda. Bolu, thanks for joining us. I mean, let's start with the key challenges here in the U.S.-Russia talks that Marco Rubio just described as a first step in a long and difficult journey towards ending the Ukraine war. What do you think his challenges will be?
Okay, thank you for having me. I think one challenge, the answer is technically in the question itself, the fact that it's a first step, after a very prolonged warfare, it's the first step after, of a long negotiation process. So it's a really complicated situation because both sides have deep-seated grievances that they need to sort out. And the fact that there's no roadmap, for this, for peace in this war, it's something that's challenging as well, because they still need to sit down and draw up a peace deal, and they still have to do a lot of back and forth. Diplomacy is a long process, negotiation is a long process, and the fact that it's just about to take we're just having the first step is I think is a major challenge. And Ukraine not being invited, to talks could pose a challenge as well, being that it can lead to slow progress in the course of their talks.
I mean, and how significant is the exclusion of Ukraine and European representatives from this high-level discussions? And what might what might this even mean for Ukraine's role in future peace talks?
Personally, I don't see anything wrong for the sidelining Ukraine at this stage of the negotiation process, and I'm going to tell you why. The fight did start with European Union. And if it's going to end, it shouldn't end with the European Union as well. It's not compulsory for EU to be part of the talks, even though it's a nice thing to do, but they're not obliged to do so. If any organization should be part of the talks, I think it should be NATO, because Russia is concerned with the fact that Ukraine was joining NATO. So Russia, they was the aggressor, so it just makes sense for them to be the first to be approached. It's part of the mediation process to approach each party separately before they sit on the table. So when they approach Russia, they have the talks, and afterwards they sign that they were going to meet with Ukraine separately. So they come together at the third stage, so that that conversation can be constructive. That's why it's important for them to meet separately first. So I don't see anything wrong for Russia to be approved at this stage, but it's if they continue to approach Russia alone, and there's a problem. There's a risk that they are going to create a deal that would favor solely Russia, which Zelensky has said he's not going to agree with.
And how could the Kremlin's willingness to speak with President Zelensky, if necessary, affect the dynamics of the conflict and the negotiation process?
Yeah, I think it's a positive development that they're at least willing to talk, because if one party is talking and the other party is not listening, and they're just literally just talking to themselves. But the clause that is important to take note of is the if necessary part there. So that clause, could also suggest that Russia is trying to control the terms of engagement, which is quite unfortunate, so they can easily say they are not coming to talks because it is not necessary. They're going to raise the ground of necessity, so if talks continue without Ukraine has said it outrightly that if they come up with a deal without them being involved in it, they are going to reject it. And I think they have every reason to reject an agreement that they didn't sign up to.
And just lastly, before I let you go, what are the potential implications of Russia's refusal to accept a peace deal without its direct involvement? And might this influence the outcome of the talks?
Yeah, I think so, because if the talks break down, it's just going to complicate the entire diplomatic process. It's going to complicate diplomacy. It's complex. The reason itself is complex. So if the one party is refusing and all, it makes it more complex. And I think the very obvious effect is that if the one party is refusing, it's going to prolong the conflicts. They're going to keep fighting. They're going to keep murdering people and things like that. But Ukraine, on the other hand, they need to be involved, and I believe they're going to be involved in the talks at some point in time, because with Ukraine being part of the talks, it still gives them that authority or that power to still be at the center of deciding what they want their future to be like. So let's see what happens in the weeks and months to come.
Well, I must say thank you so much, Michael, Bolu, for taking out the time. Bolu Michael B. here, World Affairs Analyst, is giving us a bit of insight on the peace deal with Russia and Ukraine. Once again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated that European nations must be involved in negotiations to end the Ukraine war following his meeting in Riyadh with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Rubio emphasized the necessity of the European Union's participation, citing its role in imposing sanctions on Russia. He said that the European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well. His remarks have come as diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict continue, with international stakeholders closely monitoring developments. While the U.S. and its allies have maintained pressure on Moscow, the extent of Europe's involvement in future talks remains uncertain. The situation continues to evolve as discussions on a possible resolution progress. Now, the Kremlin has stated on Tuesday that a lasting resolution in Ukraine cannot be achieved without addressing broader European security concerns. This came amid high-level talks between the U.S. and Russia, marking the first such meeting since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. Now, before launching its offensive, Russia had demanded NATO withdraw from Central and Eastern Europe. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov emphasized that a viable resolution would require comprehensive consideration of security matters across the continent. While Russia does not oppose Ukraine joining the European Union, Peskov reaffirmed Moscow's strong opposition to Kyiv's NATO membership, asserting that security and military alliances are a different issue entirely. Now, regarding potential peace talks, Peskov noted that Russian President Vladimir Putin remains open to discussions with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. And you're watching news now on News Central. Rather, you're watching news just beyond the continent. Let's go on a short break, shall we? When we return, Lebanon decries Israeli occupation of 5 key positions. We have the details just after the break. Stay with us. And the news continues in Europe, where EU finance ministers convened in Brussels to explore adjustments to budgetary rules, enabling increased military expenditure. The move comes as a response to shifting policy priorities from the United States, which has called for Europe to bolster its defense capabilities. The meeting underscores growing concerns within the EU about security, especially in light of recent geopolitical tensions. While the EU has long relied on the US for defense support, the changing dynamics have prompted European leaders to seek more autonomy in defense matters. The discussion aims to provide European nations with the financial flexibility needed to ramp up defense spending, ensuring greater preparedness in an increasingly uncertain global environment. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has revealed that the United States has shown interest in lifting sanctions on Moscow imposed over its Ukraine offensive. Lavrov made the statement after high-level talks in Saudi Arabia, where he said there was strong interest from the U.S. in removing barriers to mutually beneficial economic cooperation. He added that discussions are focused on the potential for easing restrictions that have hindered economic relations between the two countries. The comments signal a potential shift in U.S. policy, although no official decision has been made. The talks in Riyadh come amid ongoing tensions over the Ukraine conflict and broader geopolitical concerns.
Большой интерес, который мы разделяем в том, чтобы возобновить консультации по геополитическим проблемам, включая различные конфликты в различных частях мира, там, где и у США, и у России присутствуют интересы, и была большая заинтересованность в том, чтобы снять искусственные преграды на пути развития взаимовыгодного экономического сотрудничества.
Troops began their withdrawal from southern Lebanon on Tuesday, leaving only 5 key positions along the border following the expiration of a deadline set in an Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire agreement. The ceasefire was established to end the intense hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon after a year of escalating clashes, including 2 months of all-out war. The agreement was finalized on November 27th, marking a halt to the violence that had caused significant destruction. While Israel maintained troops at 5 strategic locations, its defense minister, and that's Israel Katz, emphasized that Israel would take action against any potential violations by Hezbollah. In response, Lebanon condemned the remaining Israeli presence, labeling it as an occupation and warning of UN action. Lebanon's army began deploying to border villages on Monday, taking over areas evacuated by Israeli forces. UN officials expressed concerns over any further delays in the agreed withdrawal process, which was in line with a 2006 UN Security Council resolution. In the meantime, Lebanese troops have been deployed in the southern border village of Odase, following Israel's withdrawal from most of South Lebanon. Israel's army has pulled out from all but 5 points in the region, enabling displaced residents to return to border villages that were largely destroyed during more than a year of hostilities. The withdrawal, which began Tuesday, marks a significant shift in the conflict as Lebanese forces now take control of the area. The return of residents has sparked mixed reactions, with many hoping to rebuild their homes, while others remain wary of further tensions. The deployment and return process have been closely monitored by international observers as efforts to stabilize the region continue amid lingering uncertainty. Qatar, which serves as mediator in negotiations between Israel and Hamas, emphasized that discussions regarding the future of the Gaza Strip should be determined by the Palestinian people. At a press conference in Doha, Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid Al-Ansari made it clear that the issue of Gaza remains within the scope of Palestinian Authority. He added that the Strip is still in a vulnerable state and needs as much assistance as possible. This comes as Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, speaking at a press conference in Jerusalem, applauded U.S. President Donald Trump's suggestion to take control of the water on Gaza Strip, displacing its Palestinian residents.
قلنا من اليوم الأول أن تحويل المساعدات الإنسانية إلى كرت تفاوضي في هذه المفاوضات هو بحد ذاته جريمة، وبالتالي اليوم نحن أيضا نكرر دعوتنا إلى الفتح الشامل لدخول المساعدات إلى قطاع غزة. I would say that the Israeli government would have to reply to such a question from our perspective.
And off to Oceania, where the Prime Minister of the Cook Islands has defended the country's new partnership with China, emphasizing its benefits in trade, infrastructure, and sustainable use of ocean resources. The Prime Minister, Mark Brown, urged his nation to move beyond dependency on New Zealand, describing the new accord as an opportunity for the Cook Islands to stand independently and engage in mutually beneficial partnerships. The Cook Islands, with a population of just 17,000, shares a free association with New Zealand, which has provided budgetary assistance and supported the country's foreign and defense affairs. While New Zealand raised concerns about transparency regarding the deal with China, Brown emphasized the partnership's value, highlighting the Cook Islands' contribution to New Zealand's economy. And that's all we can take from Beyond the Continent. Is back to the continent. And remember that you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, on Star Times channel 274. You can also find us on Avo TV. And if you are beyond the continent, you can stream us live on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith at TV. Good night.